Kafr Zita, Syria, April 2014. Houssam Alnahhas watched the helicopter nervously from his car seat, not yet sure if he should be worried. For a time the pilot seemed to wander aimlessly, cutting lazy circles over the rooftops of the farming village Kafrzita, as though looking for something. Now the chopper was almost directly overhead, trailing the car in which the young doctor known as Chemical Hazem was traveling. It was mid-afternoon, and the vehicle was moving on a narrow lane just outside the town, flanked only by empty fields and olive groves. There were no other possible targets in sight. No doubt about it, the helicopter was coming for them. Al-Nahas glanced at his two companions, a pharmacist and another doctor, both of them looking equally grave. The thrumming of the chopper's engine was growing steadily louder, even though rolled up car windows. "This is for us," Al-Nahas said quietly. The three men sat upright in their seats, waiting. Al-Nahas's thoughts turned briefly to his family back in Damascus. He thought of his mother, Yasmin, the girl from the Aleppo hospital who was now his fiancée. He thought about the shield bags hidden in the ice chest in the back of the car and of the precious evidence inside them, evidence that he had risked his life to obtain. The car was still moving, now in the very shadow of the helicopter overhead. As he tried to contemplate what would happen next, a new thought flashed through Al-Nahas's brain. Was it worth it? It was crazy to think that Bashar al-Assad would use chemical weapons again. The leader of Syria would not be so foolish, especially now with teams of international experts actively roaming the country, as to commit an act that might again put his government in peril. But al-Nahas had remained convinced that it would eventually happen. The war's momentum had unexpectedly shifted in the rebels' favor. Assad would surely find clever new ways to break the opposition's morale and terrorize their families. 8 months after the last big chemical attack, the young physician had become one of his country's most vocal advocates for preparing for the next one. His training classes for medical workers had expanded into an education task force and early warning network that operated out of a hospital on the Turkish border and extended deep into the Syrian countryside. But interest and funding were running out, and so were the justifications for keeping the program going. "There is no more sarin," a doctor friend argued one day. "We have other problems to deal with. Why spend more money preparing for something that's already gone?" But just as Al-Nahas predicted, shifting fortunes in the war prompted a return to old behaviors. From the countryside north of the city of Hama came reports about a new kind of barrel bomb loaded with toxic chemicals instead of the usual explosives. In the village of Kafr Zita, someone had captured the attack on cell phone video. It depicted an explosion and a cloud of yellow green smoke that smelled like bleach and drifted along the ground like valley fog. More than 100 people in the cloud's path were immediately sickened, and three later died. Yellow green smoke. Was Assad now using chlorine, the common industrial chemical used in water treatment plants and swimming pools? Al-Nahas talked it over with two hospital friends. Why not find out for themselves? "Here's our chance," Al-Nahas said. "Let's go there." He was still organizing the trip when news arrived of a similar attack in the village of Talmenes, about 30 miles from Kafr Zita. This time, some of the victims turned up at Alnahhas's own hospital. Seizing the chance to get started with their investigation, the three friends began collecting evidence hair and blood samples, as well as stories, one account after another, of a sickening gas that smelled like strong bleach. One question remained: how could he find physical proof at the sites themselves? It is commonly known that chlorine dissipates quickly. It is detectable for a few hours or perhaps a day or two and then vanishes. Where might traces of the gas still linger after an attack, and how could he preserve the evidence if he found it? Al-Nahas made several calls to overseas experts for advice. Eventually, he connected with a retired British Army colonel who was willing and able to help. Hamish, the Breton Gordon, knew something about defending against a chemical attack, having commanded weapons of mass destruction response units in the United Kingdom and in NATO. By chance, he and Al-Nahas had crossed paths. After leaving the army in 2011, the Breton Gordon had served for a time as an advisor to relief organizations in Syria. He had briefly worked as an instructor, offering guidance to Al-Nahas and the group he founded on how to prepare for a chemical attack. The young doctor reached the retired officer at his home in southwest England. Of course, he would help, the Breton Gordon said. In fact, the colonel even offered to travel to Turkey to help test any of the evidence Al Nahas happened to find.